Hello and welcome to Marketing Live. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Education Live network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts which are always available and free to you in the archives of higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions by using hashtag HigherEdLive on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates and live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the support of M. Stoner and FormStack. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. FormStack is a robust online form building solution. With an intuitive drag-and-drop interface, the platform makes it easy for marketers to create branded, mobile-ready web forms without writing code. Build donation forms, contact forms, event forms, and more with the web's only 508 compliant form builder. Publish your forms and use FormStack's social media plugins to maximize your traffic. With in-app analytics and partnerships with popular marketing tools, you can get even more out of your captured data. Visit www.formstack.com to learn more about the ways FormStack can double your response rates. So let's dive into our topic for today. Search drives a large portion of traffic to higher ed websites. So as we think about content that is most important to our constituents, how do we ensure that our pages are coming up in search results? Typically, we create content and then optimize it later for search. In this episode of Marketing Live, we'll flip the approach and explore an SEO-first content strategy. I'd like to welcome our guests today. We have Skip and Brad. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you. Great to be here.
So
Likewise.
Great. So Skip Besthoff is the CEO of Inbound Writer with over 20 years of experience as a developer, strategist, and investor, in addition to deep domain expertise in both software and internet markets. Skip's focus on innovation extends beyond business. He is a trustee of the KIPP Massachusetts. Is that KIPP or KIP?
It's KIP. KIP.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. No problem.
Massachusetts, a leading network of free open enrollment public charter schools in the Boston area. Skip holds an MBA from the Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University and an undergraduate degree from Hamilton College. And it's also pretty cool that his wife works in higher ed. Admissions. Which school does she work at?
Right now she's working for College Coach, but she's worked at Cornell and Bowdoin and Barnard and Harvard, so she's gotten around a little bit.
He's an admissions expert. That's good.
Yeah.
We also have Brad Zomek. Brad Zomek is the co-founder and senior director of content strategy at Skilled Up, a startup that was recently acquired by the Apollo Education Group. Brad lives Skilled Up's content and SEO strategy efforts and manages a team of 15 full-time writers, designers, copywriters, and marketers, as well as a robust cadre of freelance writers. Did I say that word right? Cadre?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. He's also incredibly passionate about self-education and careers and writes on both topics frequently. He has an MBA from the University of Hawaii and a BS from Cornell University. Thank you, Brad. We're lucky to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Oh, and an MBA from Hawaii. Oh, my Lord. I think we'd all love to be there right now.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that. It's actually a joint venture program between University of Hawaii and university in South China called Sun Yat-sen University. So I was studying international business in China, and I was only in Hawaii for 10 months. Then.
That's so cool. Well, welcome. We're very happy to have you both here today. So as always, our viewers can tweet any questions that they have using hashtag HigherEdLive. So let's dive in right into our discussion. Why is search engine optimization so important?
Brad, do you want to take a...
Hello?
Oh, hello?
That was weird. I'm sorry.
Did I just cut out?
No, I think I just cut out for a second. I'm sorry about that. So please continue. Why is search engine optimization so important?
Sure. So, in this day and age when somebody wants to know something or anything, whether it's like the price of a product or an answer to a question, the first place they go to is Google. And, it's ubiquitous now. People don't know an answer, they Google it. So the idea from a brand perspective is that, you want to be in their mind space before they even know you exist, and figure out what pains them and what their problems are, and to develop some sort of content that kind of matches that intent. So once they look for that problem, you're on the other end of Google waiting for them on that, hopefully on page one. So that's why SEO is really important.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that the only thing I would add there is that when you are being found, so there are a lot of reasons to promote what you're doing, and there are a lot of ways to do it, right? So you can pay for it, you can get it through social, you can get it through search, and advertise it in different means. When you are able to drive strong organic, or at least what we call organic traffic to your site, or site from search engines, what you're actually doing is creating an asset, because that's something that no one else can take away from you. It's very hard for you to earn the trust and authority to be found in Google, just as Brad said. And when you earn that trust and authority, that can stay with you for a long period of time and produce a lot of derivative benefits. And so that's another reason why it's a really important tactic.
Fantastic. So most marketers and universities have very limited budgets. I know every university I've worked at, we're trying to work within very short confines. So can you explain what are some of the key differences between organic search and paid search? So I think we all know we see those Google AdWords, but what are some of the key differences, and how worth it is it, and what can we do if we don't have enough money to do that?
I'll jump in. So I just want to continue on what Skip was just mentioning. So I think the big difference to me between paid search and organic search is, in a sense, it's both paid, right? But when you're going for organic rankings, like Skip says, we're building something. We're creating an asset that has returns. So let's say I spend $100 on a piece of content, and it ranks in Google and produces, in perpetuity, 1,000 page views per month for 2 years. On the flip side, we're talking about AdWords and display marketing and search. You spend that $100 and it's gone immediately, and the quality of the users may not be that great. Typically with content, people spend more time on the page and more time on the site, whereas paid search, bounce rates are a little bit higher and the quality of engagement is lower.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the economics of paid versus organic search are completely different. I think the nice part about paid search is it's a faucet, right? You can turn it on, you can turn it off, and to people who are willing to write those checks and candidly a little less price sensitive, hey, you want that traffic, you turn it on, you pay for it, and there it is. It's a beautiful thing. But if you want to stop writing those checks, now it gets turned off. So I agree with Brad 100%. Organic, the right way to think about organic traffic and traffic driven by search engines is it's definitely not free, but it will take you a longer period of time to develop. It's not just turning a faucet on, and that's the frustrating part of it. But the flip side is once you get it, just as Brad said, and it's basically delivering you a dividend or an annuity type traffic stream, and you look at the economics of that, typically organic traffic is about 10% of the cost of paid traffic, and just as Brad said, with higher intent, and it tends to convert better.
Excellent. And I think a lot of times, we forget as consumers, the cost is really passed on to us, so we end up spending more money for all those things that we're clicking on. So, great. So, now normally, I think a lot of folks, and I'm definitely guilty of this, we write the content and then we try to optimize it for search. So, what do you recommend for the process of developing an SEO strategy that is more effective?
So maybe why don't I tackle this one first, and then Brad, you can chime in and maybe talk about some of the things we've done together since Brad and I have collaborated on some things. So in terms of what you mentioned there, Amy, in terms of writing content and then after the fact optimizing it, that's basically what our company Inbound Writer does. Meaning what we have discovered is that, and it's a funny thing, most of the performance of your content is locked into place before you even put pen to paper, based upon various different analytic factors that when I decide to write about electrical engineering programs in the Midwest, if that's what I want to write about, the minute I decide to write about that quote-unquote topic, and I'm going to publish it at a specific university's website, all of the analytic factors that are going to determine how much traffic that piece of content is going to get are pretty much locked in. And this is something that hasn't necessarily always performed this way, because people think about keywords and people think about, well, if I have the right keywords and I just drop those in after the fact, that's going to drive my traffic. But guess what? The 1,000 plus PhDs in Palo Alto and elsewhere that are actually writing the code behind search engines, they're pretty smart people. And what they've done is evolved search from a keyword-driven platform to one that really focuses on semantics and focuses on heuristics, and it focuses on audience intent. So Google and other search engines want to do a much better job of anticipating what you really mean when you type in something. And what it means is that just dropping in keywords after the fact isn't really going to get you to perform and get you where you want to go. So in terms of next generation types of techniques that are really going to get you ahead, typically it's doing research up front, and it's understanding that there are these different dynamics at play, and being cognizant of it as you're planning your content.
And we should know our audiences. I think that's a really good point. And I mean, developing that first, I think that's great. Brad, what do you have to add?
So I think, when it comes to developing an SEO strategy, the first step is, before you get into writing, take a step back and think more about the user first. Get a really good understanding of your users, and if you have the resources and the capabilities to do some survey work, even have relationships where you're talking on an ongoing basis, understand what keeps them up at night, and then that's the point when you start talking about like developing a strategy and what are the problems at different phases of the buyer journey, there's like the typical funnel awareness and consideration, decision, even pre-awareness before they even know who you are. And the idea is that to come up with ideas at different phases of that funnel. Well, it doesn't really work like that. In theory, the funnel is supposed to be nice and neat, but it's actually more of probably some circular path that people spend a lot of time floating around the blog before they actually go to purchase something. But taking those ideas, mapping them to keywords, and then you develop the content. And then when you develop the content, it's got to be really awesome. So the idea behind content is that it's got to build trust. So in order to do so, you need to educate people, inform them, inspire, motivate, and entertain. And if that's like the best piece of content, then you have a chance at ranking. And as Skip points out, that it's really hard to rank in competitive keywords, and even if you do the best job, you might not get on page one. So we work with Inbound Writer, and it has really helped us add some predictability to whether or not we can rank and get traffic off of keywords and content that we seek to build.
I love what you said, that we need to build content for the user and that builds trust. Because I was working with one of my staff members to develop videos, and we started building these videos that like we thought were important, but when it comes down to it, it's like, would I watch this? And we all sat there, we're like, no. It's like, well, then why are we doing it? We need to develop stuff that people are going to want to see. Think about them first before, not the message we want to put out there, but the message that they actually want to receive. I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. An advisor to our company is a great guy who's been around the digital media space for a long time, and he's built some very significant digital media companies. And when talking about this, his advice to us has always been, does Procter & Gamble release new product without doing any research? Yeah. Or any good company along those lines? And the answer is, of course not. They do a ton of research to understand their buyer, what they want, just as Brad said, the buyer's journey, and so on. Well, why is online content any different? And it's the same thing. And so doing a little research up front to understand exactly what you were saying, Amy, understand what you think your consumer wants of that information, and then building into it is really a much better way to go. You're going to reach your audiences, you're going to have better metrics and all those things. The thing that's hard is it's totally counterintuitive to everything we learned growing up and writing, right? We all want to get in there. We all want to, put that pen to paper. We all want to start typing because we've got our ideas in our head and we want to get them out. So you got to fight those tendencies, and that's what I find is very difficult.
That's a really good point. That's great. All right, so we talked a little bit about the content strategy and what we need to do to develop that. And I think we talked a little bit about what our first priority should be when creating content. So what types of content should we, or let's go a little bit more into the first priority. So we talked about how we want to develop it to what the users want. Like, how do we create content that the users want that they're going to want to share? So we talked a little bit about research, but how can we make sure it aligns with organizational goals and stuff like that?
I think that's part of the strategy, right? I think everything that you build should be for the user and be aligned with messaging. So I think one of the key parts of content strategy is having that editorial mission. Beyond knowing the users, having an editorial mission and having different types of content. Some types of content are meant to inform, whereas others are meant to entertain and motivate. And I think there's that overlying framework that every piece of content has a different mission, to help your user kind of take the next step and drive a good decision or outcome.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that when we see people perhaps not doing a good job in this arena, it's when you say, so why are you developing that blog or that video or that white paper or whatever you're doing? And people say, well, I don't know. I want traffic to my site, or we just want to keep the site fresh, so to speak. That's typically not what you want. You want to go one level deeper, just as Brad said, which is, what is our organization trying to achieve? Okay, we've got a buyer's journey, or we've got a specific type of audience that we're trying to reach, to educate, to drive them to a certain call to action or something, and what is the type of content that's going to allow them to go through that process at certain stages of their education process. So you want to think of it that way at the broad level. And then to your other point, should it be videos, should it be blogs, should it be ebooks? It really can be all the above. I think part of the answer to that is figuring out what engages your audience, and part of that is there's also a little bit of trial and error, but there is, again, research you can do here, and so one of my colleagues here often jokes about this, which is and the search engines, bringing it back to search engines a little bit, they increasingly really understand this stuff. So this is going to sound like a funny example, but you guys will get it. So let's say I want to write about how to fix a bike chain. Okay? No one's ever going to read a piece of content about how to fix a bike chain. They're going to go to video every single time, because who wouldn't want to just see how someone does it rather than read 300 or 400 words about how they do it? That's a no-brainer. Think about it from that perspective. So certain types of content fulfill certain missions very, very well, and you want to think about what that mission is, what you want the content to accomplish, and then back into the specific form of content you're going to develop.
I think that's a really good point, and when it comes down to it, you don't waste your time putting content in certain formats just because you want to diversify. Put it there because it makes the most sense to put it there. There's no sense in making a video on, whatever it might be, if that's not how people want to view that content. I think that's great. So what kinds of content should we avoid for search engine optimization?
I'll jump in there. So just like there's no silver bullet for what content works, I feel like on the flip side, what doesn't work for me, may work for Skip or Higher Ed Live. So I think it all depends on the product and the market, especially the market and what they want. I guess, for instance, millennials, they like video, they like, blog posts with like emotional appeal. Whereas, if you're selling a business product to a sophisticated B2B market, they want case studies and white papers, webinars. So I don't think there's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's just kind of a fit for what's appropriate for that particular customer. So yeah, I think also there's like budgetary constraints, like don't do video if you don't have any money, because if you're going to do video and you can't do it well, don't do it at all. But yeah, I think it's really a function of what does the consumer want and what can you build with the resources that you have.
I think that cost comment, Brad, is awesome, and I totally, you look at something like video. Video is not cheap, and typically you don't want a one-off thing. So if you're going to produce video, you're not going to want to produce one. You're going to want to produce 5 or 10 or whatever the number is. So I think that's great. I also think in terms of all forms of content, generally speaking, can perform well in search, but it is important to understand there are certain tips and tricks around some that don't necessarily work with others. So a couple things I would say to add there would be one, and maybe this is an obvious statement, but we have run into this before, walled content doesn't work. So we have run into situations where people have a whole bunch of PDFs that are sitting behind walled gardens and password protected. Well, that's not going to be discoverable content, which I know is an obvious statement, but you'd be surprised sometimes, some people say, oh, yeah, hadn't thought about it that way, right? So PDFs and different types of containers of content that tend to lock content and putting content behind walls can produce some technical barriers. Also with other types of content, again, back to video SEO is an art in and of itself. And so if you are going to do video and you do want to have that discoverable, the types of methodologies you're going to use to make sure it's discoverable via YouTube and Google and whatnot, there are going to be some different techniques at play there. And so for certain types of content, you just want to make sure you know what that is.
Excellent. And we do have a question from Elizabeth Rose on Twitter. Elizabeth wants to know, research before writing. So what do you think us writers should be researching that we aren't necessarily?
Okay, good question. So I think it depends on really the article or whatever you're developing. Maybe it's a white paper. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're researching, it should be quite exhaustive. Researching going to the best breed, whatever it is, websites and blogs and that online, and then going offline too. Anybody can research using Google as a research tool, but it's great. Skilled up in the early days, we tried to make our articles always very comprehensive to answer the question to the best of the ability. But without any journalists, so we actually did most of it with secondary research. So we got very much when we started getting more resources after the acquisition. We started getting into more journalistic reporting, actually talking to people and quoting experts. So yeah, I think it's all about being comprehensive and balancing, secondary and primary research. I personally think that in the first paragraphs of the article, you need to start with a bang. I think starting with anecdotes and quotes and data is a great. I call that backup. But kind of starting with a bang, getting people kind of pulled into the story very quickly is really important, because I find those 3 components actually start a great intro to an article and get people to continue reading. I think the attention span for an article that you're reading online of the average person is really short. You have 30 seconds to capture their attention. If not, they're out. So I think, yeah, like I said, balancing your research and then providing really good insights and sexy data quotes early on to get people into what you're doing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And when you are doing your research, the types of things I would focus on, Elizabeth, would be things like, what is the vernacular? As you're reading content and as you're doing your research on a particular topic you want to write about, what's the vernacular people are using to talk about that? So that's something that people tend to miss, right? Which is, okay, I think about it in this type of vernacular. So a great example, I was doing some work earlier this week with someone who wanted to write about doing a personality test for DBAs. And so this is a company that develops technology for DBAs, database administrators. And so they had a piece of content written on a personality test for DBAs. Well, we knew that piece of content, no matter how great it is going to be an absolute dud and not perform well, because no one's looking for information on personality tests for DBAs. There's no audience for that. It's not in the vernacular, and if anyone is looking for it, it's about a dozen people. So you can do that type of research up front to say, listen, you could write an absolute brilliant masterpiece, but if you're not aligned with vernacular and your target audience, it's never going to get any traffic. So that's one thing you can do.
Wait, what were you searching for? Because instead of DBAs, what could you do?
Well, and in fact, what we suggested they do is write about hiring database administrators. Oh. Okay, so first off, no one associates personality tests with DBAs. But if you want to write about hiring a database administrator, and you can still write about how knowing that database administrator's personality is a very important and critical aspect of the hiring process, because you want to make sure that person gets along with people and has a cool demeanor, and so you can still write the same content effectively, but you're going to take an angle on it that really aligns with the audience and with their vernacular. That's the research that Brad was talking about, primary and secondary sources. That's the type of thing you can pull out of that research. And then in addition, know who your competition is. So Brad just made a comment when we hopped on the phone that if you can't get on page one, you're going to have a hard time, right? So if you're writing a piece of content on, again, how to hire a database administrator, and you're finding that Oracle and SAP and all these massive technology companies, Microsoft, have all written on the exact same subject, you're not going to displace them. They're too big, they're too powerful, they've got huge trust and authority in the eyes of the search engines, and if you go head-to-head against someone like that, you're pretty much going to lose every time, and you're going to have wasted a lot of time and effort developing that content. So sometimes if you're running into a buzzsaw, rather than going from A to B, it's not a straight line. Sometimes maybe you'll have to develop what we call long tail type ideas, or other specific variants on the idea you want to write about, where you're going to get around that competition and still be able to reach your audience and tell the story you want to tell.
That's an excellent point. I love that. So in getting our content together, we talked about like our research and how we should put it together and all of that. Let's say that we have everything ready to go. Where do we promote our content? What are the best ways to share it, and when should we be doing that, and how should we be doing that? Is that effective, or just people feeling like they're getting too many messages and so it's just kind of following into the void?
I think, it always goes back to, it depends on the user and the market, right? So, if I'm selling a high-end online course about sales or IT innovation, I probably want to post it on LinkedIn. Whereas, if I'm teaching somebody some basic, how to learn HTML or Photoshop 101, maybe somewhere like Twitter and Facebook is better. Something that's highly visual, good for Pinterest, Instagram. But at the end of the day, it's like wherever your user is, that's where you distribute it. And in addition to that, anywhere, whereas you can maybe achieve some virality within a small market or niche market that's attractive to you without spending much money. So I guess, for instance, Reddit is a good place for that, and you can get, we've had a few searches of content that we put on Reddit. But yeah, Reddit's only good if your users are on Reddit.
Yeah, I mean, Brad nailed that. I can't add any more to that. Knowing where your audience is and promoting it in those areas is 100% spot on. And I thought that was an awesome example of, if it's a business audience or degrees and people that are oriented that way, yeah, you're going to go LinkedIn. And if it's, artists and things like that, you're going to go in a different direction. So that's 100% right. I think the only thing I could add to that would be a lot of times people will say, well, okay, but should I be focused on search and organic traffic, or should I be focused on social and social promotion? And the answer is it's not an either or. It's both, right? So when you promote your content socially, you're going to, hopefully, if you do it well, you're going to want to reach out to influencers in your space, and you're going to want to be putting good content that's good, authoritative, high-quality content that's going to do well in search. You're going to want to put that in front of influencers so it also can be promoted via social. And those two worlds are coming together. People have traditionally thought of those as kind of siloed activities. They're really not. Google just did a major deal with Twitter where they're sharing data and they're sharing, collaborating in different ways, in the ways that they're serving their users. And those two worlds are coming together. So I wouldn't think about them as silos. But I would think about them as really understanding where your audiences are and try to get in front of them every way you can.
One other comment I want to make there is another place you can put your content is on someone else's blog. So something that's like often overlooked in SEO is guest posting. Great way to finding other content platforms. For instance, if I'm selling a product around entrepreneurship, it'd be great to go write about entrepreneurship on entrepreneur.com or Inc. Likewise, if I was doing something about Photoshop or web design, maybe go to Creative Block. So your content does not just have to exist on your blog. You can put it on other sites, and you get a link back to your site, a byline, and that's a good way to not only get some brand awareness out there, but also build kind of link equity. So when another site links to you, it passes some SEO value back to your site and helps you increase your domain authority, which in turn kind of helps you rank higher for other keywords.
If anything, that's just building brand ambassadors, because other sites linking your site illustrates brand credibility, whether it's for SEO or not. It's other areas saying that your area knows, your department or your office or whatever knows what you're talking about. So I think that's wonderful. We do have a question from Kelsey on Twitter. Are ebooks/digital magazines a thing of the past, or are there substantial SEO benefits? If so, do you have any recommendations?
I don't think, to me, ebooks, anything that you download, to me, does not have much SEO value. That's some function of like lead generation. Though often people use an ebook as a bait to kind of collect someone's email address, and you're kind of giving them value, and in return you want their email address, which is permission to send them more information. So I think ebooks are great, and ebooks or white papers, any sort of downloadable is something. It's not really meant for SEO. It's meant for attracting leads, because once you own their email address, you have their attention for a little bit longer. Maybe like 3 months before they get tired of your emails and unsubscribe.
If we're lucky, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I don't think the landing page that the ebook is on might have some SEO value. I think there's it's always good to have fresh content on your site, but it's not going to have any outsized value above and beyond any other type of content you would create, and it's going to take a lot of work.
Excellent. So I know one of the big things that I've heard in SEO is you got to throw in keywords, and keywords are where they're at. So are keywords where they're at, and what do you guys think? Are they as effective as they were in the past? Because, so often we would write a blog post or a web page, and then we would go back in and try to fit things in where they wanted to see them. And so what do you think?
Yeah, the answer is they are not as important as they used to be in the past. And so a quick little anecdote that we could use is I'm up here in the Boston area, and I happen to love barbecue. Okay, so which I know is crazy talking to you, Amy, down in Charlottesville. I'm in the wrong place from a culinary perspective, that's for sure. So if I'm in Boston and I happen to love barbecue, and you think about that very keyword-centric approach that you just mentioned, what a traditional SEO keyword optimization process would look like is it would say, oh, well, should we insert terms in our text like BBQ or barbecue or BAR-B-Q? And looking at some analytics on each of these variations, and one's more popular than the other, and that's the one I'm going to use, et cetera, et cetera. That is a very traditional keyword-based optimization process. I think if you rolled back the clock 3, 4, 5 years ago, there were definitely merits to that. But since that time, Google has rolled out major updates called Panda and Penguin and Hummingbird. And again, the 1,000+ PhDs in Palo Alto, they're pretty smart, and they know that BBQ and barbecue and any variant thereof, they're all the same. So Google knows what you're looking for, and putting one specific variant of a term over the other isn't really going to get you anywhere. And so some of the research and some of the things that Brad and I are talking about here are suggesting ask yourself a higher set of questions. So maybe, does anyone care? Is BBQ and barbecue, BBQ in Boston, is that even something worth talking about? Maybe no one cares. Maybe I'm a complete aberrant, and it's a seafood town, not a barbecue town, so you can write a beautiful piece of content, you can have all the keywords you want, and you're still not going to get traffic, right?
This is America. You have to love barbecue.
Well, there you have it. At least I'm there with you. And there is very good barbecue in Boston if you know where to look for it. I'll be happy to take anyone there. So keywords are becoming less important in a very strict sense. And what Google and other search engines and web platforms are trying to promote by introducing more semantic sophistication onto the web is A, better match user intent. What is that user really wanting to get at? And Google and other search engines want to satisfy those user requests. But the other thing is they're actually trying to avoid having people game the system by just stuff keywords into their content, thinking that that's going to give them some advantage. In fact, if you do that technique now, Google and other search engines will actually penalize you. So what they really want you to do, and we've seen it work, and I think it does make sense, is just write good content, right? So identify an audience you want to connect with, write good, high-quality content in areas where you think there's an audience and where you can add value, where you have authority, where you've got something unique to say. And if you're doing that, and back to one of the things that Brad mentioned earlier, just the content has to be well written. It's not about stuffing it with keywords. It's just about making it well written. And if you're doing that, then sure, there are certain SEO optimization techniques and best practices that you can employ, but those things are going to be far secondary to the other things that I'm talking about here in terms of making that content successful.
Microphone drop. I think that, Skip, you hit the nail on the head. I probably would. I don't have much to add there. I think these days keywords don't matter as much. I think for us, we start with a keyword that's more of just inspiration for the topic, and we do kind of that ABC SEO, in the title, the URL, and we're not even that conscious of how it's spread out the text because Google recognizes latent semantic keywords. Like Skip says, if you do too much keywords, Google recognizes that. So it's all about doing good content. Do good content or go home.
Like you guys said before, it's all about quality versus quantity. I love
Well, and find a good topic to write about. Find a good topic where you're passionate, where you've got authority, where there aren't 50 other people writing on the exact same thing. That's where you're going to be successful.
And one comment I want to add there. So I think so. I've heard of a few blogs that actually don't focus on SEO at all, and really where they come at it is they've kind of built a community. So people more so come to be part of the community. They don't even care. Might not even be finding this blog through Google. It might be through word of mouth and social. So yeah, I mean there are definitely other ways to get found, and it's like. I mean, I don't know how well this blog ranks in Google, but they're selling a product and people are buying it. So I'm sure they're not really complaining that much.
That's cool.
Very neat. All right, so are there any web tools, preferably free, because let's be honest, we have no budget, that we can use to test our content and see whether or not it's SEO friendly and how high we could potentially rank and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think there are not too many free tools that predict rank. That's science. So some intense data science there. So I mean, what's available for free out there, you can check. They're like post checkers, right? So in WordPress, there's a pretty popular SEO plugin called Yoast SEO. And that kind of checks, all the metadata for the keyword. And that's a pretty simple way just to, make sure whatever you're writing about is in there. But I mean, it's not particularly smart. It just looks for that one keyword cluster, and if the word is arranged any other way, it'll probably return bad ratings. I mean, there are plenty of tools that we use for SEO that are free, right? That's more so for keyword research. Like the Google Keyword Planner, Google Trends, Google Predict. I guess when you start typing a keyword and other words start popping up, Uber Suggest. But as far as I know, in terms of forecasting, what your topic's going to be and what you might expect from it, I think Inbound Writer might be one of the few tools out there that gives that kind of level of insight. And
thank you, Brad.
You can correct me if I'm wrong there.
I'm not going to disagree with you. Yeah, no, I do think that there is a little bit of you get what you pay for, but I also understand and definitely empathize with the frustration of people saying, listen, I just want to write my blogs and things like that, and I don't want to spend $1 million, and you just want to move on with your day. I totally get that. The reality is this is a very, SEO and content and the intersection, it is a very competitive place, and there are a lot of people doing it. And when you think about the time and effort that you're going to put into it, you might want to think twice before you just go, get that free tool that, you might feel good that, okay, it's telling me to do something, but at the end of the day, when you really measure your performance, I think what you'll find is, again, you get what you pay for. All that said, what I would recommend is actually exactly what Brad just said, which is Google's suite of free products tend to be the best out there. And not only is the data coming from the source, since Google itself is the source of so much of the data in our industry, but they are good. I would invest more time in finding free products because, again, I would just kind of go right to the source with Google. So I would invest a lot of time in searching far and wide for every free product under the sun. I would go to Google and I would invest your time in learning what all that data says and how to interpret it and how to analyze it, because that's where you're going to pull insights out. If you do want to step up to another level of sophistication, that's what Inbound Writer does, and we're here for that. But if you want to start with the free approach, that's exactly what I would do. And if you can educate yourself on how to leverage a lot of the data that Google's going to give you, that's going to get you farther than you might expect.
I love that. And I know, backing up what you guys said, I love Google Analytics, what it can tell me, and then also Google Webmaster Tools has some neat SEO features.
Sure.
We did get a question from Elizabeth Rose. Any suggestions for free SEO tool plugins for Drupal sites?
I don't use Drupal, so I have no comment.
Yeah, I don't
use WordPress.
I don't use Drupal either. We're also more familiar with WordPress, but I think Yoast that Brad mentioned is one of the most popular ones out there, and I would be really shocked if that doesn't have a Drupal plugin as well. So I would check on that one.
Awesome, thank you. So another question that we have is how can we, from Jeffrey Scholl, I'm guessing Jeffrey, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, how can we apply these tips to an institution setting where you're trying to push content to particular student groups?
Sure. So I think I don't think much of what we discuss changes. I think it's all about understanding users. So really, where it differentiates is what are the different user personas. For instance, at Skilled Up, we had for our B2C market, we had the young dreamer, someone who's like graduating college and or recently graduated, trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. We have self-directors, people who are freelancers, know what they want, probably more interested in kind of quickly finding the skills that have higher ROI learning. And then we have go-getters who are kind of maybe 5 to 10 years out and looking to climb the corporate ladder. And each one of those people think about different things at different stage of the buyer's journey, and there are different kind of ideas and topics and keywords. So yeah, it's really you're writing different content to different people, and maybe even at different places on your website. So there are many websites that have multiple blogs for different audiences.
Excellent. Anything to add, Skip?
No, I totally agree.
Perfect. And I like what you said about building different audiences and trying to tailor towards them, because they're going to have different needs and wants. I mean, that's one of the big things we're doing here at the University of Virginia is, what an incoming freshman wants is totally different from what an incoming or an outgoing fourth year wants. It's important to make sure that you're making it specific. All right, great. And we do have one extra question from Rose Sterling. So keywords on the verge of being obsolete, it still wouldn't hurt to include them, right?
Of course.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't hurt. You don't. What you want to avoid, Rose, is you want to avoid this technique called keyword stuffing, which is you don't want to put them in unnecessarily or in a exaggerated way. That can actually hurt you. But other than that, no, keywords aren't bad. Just if you're writing as you just said, Amy, if you're writing about tips for outgoing fourth years, write about tips for outgoing fourth years and just use the type of vernacular that would identify with that piece of content and with that audience with some degree of regularity, which any good writer is going to do anyway. And you're going to be fine. I just think it's not that they're going to hurt, but they're also back to BBQ versus barbecue. They're probably not going to help as much as you think either. And I just wouldn't waste a ton of cycles thinking through it too hard.
Sure. One thing I want to add there is that probably at least like half a dozen times a year I read an article that says SEO is dead. Keywords are dead. They're not dead. I mean, I still have an SEO guy on my team. Sure. Everything is very keyword centric. But it's just, I guess, when it gets within the post, we don't go crazy, analyzing like the frequency of certain keywords. We just write the best thing we can. We answer the question, the problem that we're trying to solve to the best of our ability, and we try to do it in an engaging way. And outside of the ABC SEO, you don't have to worry about it too much.
Excellent. So as we are, wrapping up here at the very end, I want to thank you guys so much for answering all of our good questions. And so one of the most important things is that we have to show analytics for all of our work. I mean, that's the biggest thing we're seeing across higher ed is being able to illustrate return on investment and how all of our efforts are actually doing something. So do you guys have any recommendations on tools or how to do timeline and illustrate that we're more efficient at doing things, or what are some things we can do to say that we did good stuff, we did it fast, or we can do it better, and here's why?
Sure. I'll jump in really quick because I live in this world. So I think number one, I think there are like two different groups that you want to be conscious of. Number one is like the customer, right, or the customer, people who have interest, and then the broader audience. So I think for the broader audience, Google Analytics, most of the work is in Google Analytics, right? You want to track, returning visitors on page time, which actually is sometimes not very accurate, but more so, pages, a number of pages kind of viewed and whatnot. So I guess that's trying to guesstimate engagement, with the content. And I think as you move down, notification. And as you move down that funnel, I think other things you can track to see what the effect of the content marketing is. Are people engaging with the offers, right? Most people are trying to generate some sort of interest, whether it's emails or clicks on Facebook. I mean, we at Skilled Up, we care about emails, and we try to assess the number of emails that are coming from the content and what piece of content they're coming from to help us know what works and what doesn't. And obviously, the bottom of the funnel is purchasing. And with Google Analytics, you can attribute the full journey. Where was the first touch point? Where did they go next? Where did they go next? And kind of map them from like how many pieces of content they looked at to when they signed up for the newsletter, and then maybe 3 months, 6 months down the road if they purchased something. So I will say, when it comes to content and building an individual piece of content, like you can't really expect to build a piece of content, even if you put your heart and soul into it. You spent your whole weekend writing an article, optimizing it. One thing you want to be conscious of that you might not see any sort of like traction in search for 3 to 6 months.
It's totally true. It's totally true. And I think that definitely concur with everything that Brad's saying. And it comes back, the other aspect of that, I would say, is when a lot of folks map value, Amy, what they map value to activity. Well, we generated several blogs a week this month. That means we're doing great, and all that good stuff, and we thought of really innovative things to write about, and all that's great. Oftentimes then what people will do is they'll say, hey, we generated 20 pieces of content last month, and look at our Google Analytics. Back to Google Analytics, our traffic's moving up and to the right. Awesome. And people will stop there. And what I would strongly encourage you to do is not do that, because it tends that only 10%, and this is a little bit of a disheartening fact that I don't want to end on a downer, but it's absolutely the truth. For all the work we're talking about, research and all the effort we're going to put into creating content, 10, maybe 20% of that content max will ever get consumed. So you're talking about 80% of your efforts are going to hit pretty much the cutting room floor, and that's kind of tough to think about, and that's really building on what Brad just said, which is you could spend all weekend writing a piece of content and think it's great, and it doesn't work, and you don't really know why, and maybe it's because you were writing about a DBA personality test rather than hiring database administrators, but those things happen. So what I would encourage you when you think about performance and you think about all the metrics that Brad just mentioned, which is 100% right, don't get waylaid by a vanity metric, okay? Understand your goals, back to the content strategy, and say, okay, we created 20 pieces of content, and that was a bear, and we did it, and we cranked it out. Did we have to do that? And how many of those 20 actually performed the way we wanted them to and did what we wanted to, and the ones that didn't, what happened? And what you want to do for those ones that worked, because they are the rare gems, you want to stay on those. You want to promote them more, republish them, build derivative content assets around them, because you found something that worked, which is a rare thing, and you want to leverage it to the greatest degree possible. And to the things that didn't work, at least understanding, okay, 8 out of 10 of the things that we did last month didn't work. What did we do wrong, and what can we do differently? And I think if you have Google Analytics and you learn how to use it, and you're mapping the process the way Brad described, and you're asking intelligent questions, you're going to really be very successful.
Excellent. I love what you guys are both saying about like mapping things down and looking at the conversion funnel and aligning it with the goals. I think both of that is beautiful, because it shows that, if you can align it and say that our complaints went down, or that we had more students that we served, or we had more donors come through, I love that. This is how they came in, and here's how we kept them. I think that's great. So, well, I would like to thank you both so much for joining us today. You guys did a wonderful job, and you guys were so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
It was fun. I could talk about this stuff all day long.
Same here. And I guess, remember, one thought I want to leave with everybody: if you're on the second page of Google, that's kind of where they store dead bodies. So, I guess the idea is like, do your ABC SEO, but at the end of the day, do great content, and just be ready to invest some serious time into this. If you're going to get into content, it's not like, oh, I'm going to do content for a couple of weeks and the traffic's going to come. It's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you really need to be invested in it, and it's something that you need to communicate to the rest of the organization too. Because as a content person, when you start, people are looking at you. Okay, this guy's sitting around, doing SEO and writing articles, or has a team of people doing it. And what's going on over there? We're spending all this money. But the effects, it could take 6 months. Some blogs it takes almost 2 years before the flywheel hits. So it's really about perseverance and drive. And the truth is, so SEO is I used to think it's kind of like this magic art, but it's really quite simple. And I think if you invest the time to understand it, and you're creating content that is educational, it's inspirational, motivational, entertaining. I think at the end of the day, it's got to be trustworthy, and that's the type of stuff that you see pop up to the first page of Google. That's the stuff that your friends share in their Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter feeds, and the stuff that your friends email you. That's good content, and that's you're creating good content with fundamental SEO, you'll get found.
And if all else fails, just add cats, right?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, guys. I hope you all have a great day. And as always, you can check out more shows from Higher Ed Pros on higheredlive.com. Thanks so much, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.